Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. This program is one of our gifts to you from the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory, and it is for all of us because the concepts of Dr. Glasser are plain and simple, but they're also very deep. And I've been in this for 20 some years, seems like much more than that. And so have you, but yet there's always new things that we can learn and see. So today we're going to be looking at the situation A and situation B. Let me share the screen with you so we can kind of know what we're looking at. But then we're going to be talking about what is the reasoning behind situation A and B and how can we make changes. And I have asked Mary if she would share with us the difference in situation A and B.
All right. So I hope I'm answering the question as you've asked it, but situation A is when we are not in effective control. So it says that up at the top there. Situation B is when we are in more effective control. And so you'll notice that there are differences, right? In coloring of the arrows, in coloring of the connection between the behavioral system and the car. And you'll also notice that the scales are more in balance in situation B than they are in situation A, but they're not completely balanced, because if they were completely balanced, we would have no motivation to act. So that's why this is negative feedback loop. So we're always trying to have fulfill our needs through our quality world pictures. And when the information that we're receiving from the real world is not, we're perceiving that we're not getting those quality world pictures met, then our scales are out of balance and we are moved to behave in some way to get those pictures met. Is that good?
Yeah, sounds good. So, and Sharon, can you share with us what quality world pictures are?
There. Okay, quality world pictures, I always like to think of as the best of the best of a person's life. And those are those experiences and people that we find to be the most need fulfilling in our lives. And we keep them in this special place, all in the yellow world, which is our happy color. And when we don't have them there, as Mary was saying, we see the scales tilt above when they are there, and pretty much matching, we see the scales below pretty well balanced.
Right. And so that quality world, does everyone have one of those, whether we have a name for it or not?
Of course we do, because we all want the same things in our world, those basic needs. I was not talking about them. I didn't, you're going to have someone else talk about them. But we all are striving in all of our behaviors to have all of the things we desire in our lives to be there in this quality world. And so mine will not match yours, nor yours will not match mine or the next person's. They are very individualized to what we each want in our quality worlds.
Okay, well, Alice, would you like to share what the basic needs are? If someone wants to pinch in, and what are our basic needs?
Okay, I'll take care of basic needs. So Dr. Glasser described the basic needs as genetic. So they're inside each of us, and the degrees of them are different. And he distinguished between the old brain and the new brain. So you can see the old brain need is survival. And so people like to talk about survival as food, water, shelter, but also reproduction. So to keep the species on the planet. So kind of helps us to understand what that's all about. And then he talked about the new brain needs. So you can see that they're connected to quality world and they're connected to each other. But the new brain needs are the psychological, the cognitive needs. And so they're all there again in different degrees. So he talked about love and belonging, which is really connection, feeling a part, being part of a group. It's the human need, the human being with other humans. The power need is, and many people don't like the sound of that because it sounds so negative, but in a sense it could be, because the power need is really that of achievement, of strength, of knowing things, of being good at something. So the power need, what'll happen with it is, hopefully it's within us. It's the Yahoo, I got it piece of us. And so that power need also, though, can also be with other people. You know, great minds get together and come up with great things. So, but it can also be, if one can't get one's power need met, that it becomes something that people will gain power by having power over others. So that probably is where we get that feeling that power isn't such a great thing. So then there's freedom, and that's a sense of liberty. And it's a sense of liberty from something. So the freedom from being embarrassed, perhaps. It's the freedom to, so the freedom to do what one would like to do when one would like to do it. So freedom from, freedom to, that sense of liberty. And lastly is fun. And fun is really enjoyment, pleasure, also learning. So it's that aha moment is just a whole bunch of fun and just pleasure. So those are the 5 basic needs. Again, everybody has them, genetically driven. We have conversations on whether they can change over time. What we know is that there's different degrees amongst people.
Okay, thanks. That's excellent definitions of all those and looking at it from all sides. So here we have situation A, that is when we are not in effective control or whenever things are pretty chaotic. And then learning how to live a life where we have more control over situations. So I want to kind of, I like to go, have you ever had a stack attack where you had, 1 or 2 problems, it was kind of an issue, but when they just came from all sides. So here's a little scenario, the one that it's, the alarm goes off and the snooze button was punched 1 too many times. And then getting up and getting ready to leave and be to work on time and all that, there is an issue with dress, whether it's shoes or whatever. You can't find what it is that you need. And then it's raining outside, whether the car is outside or in the garage, it's just going to make it a little bit more difficult getting to work. But not only that, you notice that there's a flat tire, the very idea. And then in trying to fix the tire or call a neighbor or AA or whatever to come over, you realize that there's a tool that's missing and you're afraid of being fired. And then you get in a cab or get your own car or whatever, and you stop and get some coffee, and then in the hubbub, you spill it. And anyway, so there's just kind of that. So up here, now, if we're looking at our chart and we're in ineffective control at that moment, there's a lot of chaos. What is this comparing place? What is being compared? And I'm not going to call you out, that you can all give a thought on that. What is being compared?
All of those things that seem, oh, go ahead, Mary, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that the outside world, the real world, is not matching my quality world picture of how I would like my day to go. So none of those things are anything, are not reflective of anything that's in my quality world. And so I have my quality world picture, which is fed by that arrow coming from the quality world. And then I have what's coming from the real world through the filters of total knowledge and valuing. And those make up my perceived world. And so what I'm perceiving is that I'm not getting what I want.
Okay, so here it is. You can watch the little arrow. That right here is what you want, and right here is what is actually happening in the real world. And so the scales are out of balance. And even whenever we become our most effective, they always are still a little bit, because rarely can we have everything exactly the way I want it. So they're measuring and comparing, and you could put specifics there that we could make it general by saying we're comparing what I want versus what life is giving me or what life is handing me.
Mona,
So, yes.
it's, I reflect sometimes on my refinement of my understanding of choice theory, especially in talking with colleagues and reading, hearing Glasser another time. And there was a time that I said the scales show the comparison of what I want with what I have. And then I quit saying that, and several of you here said it there too. I think more accurately, this is what I say now, a comparison between what I want and what I perceive that I have.
Beautiful.
I mean, a lot of times people, you know, oh, nobody likes me. No, I can't, nobody trusts me, nobody, whatever. And that's not the reality. Yeah, but that's the person's perception. So it's their perception rather than what they have, you know. And so that was a fine tuning thing for me.
Right. That is beautiful. It's what I perceive that I have. So I
Yeah.
may want a Cadillac, but this car that I have gets me where I need to go.
Yeah.
And so I can, yeah, what I perceive that I have. So if you will notice here, there's a little red arrow coming down, kind of a little zzz, and there's one here too. And in the fine print, it says that these are involuntary behaviors, very brief, involuntary behavior, kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. So who can explain what that is? Kind of the, oh no.
Okay, I'll own up. That very brief is that moment, to use your scenario as an example. Every time she faced something that wasn't going right, she got one of those, but it was over as soon as she felt it. It was very brief. And then we'll talk more about the arrow coming out of the top, which is what we do as we behave with this information. But it is just brief. And then we move on to looking at our behavioral world and what we're going to do.
And that little brief behavior is kind of a message to the body saying, do something.
Exactly. That's the behavior that would be coming out. Well said.
Right, right. So who can explain to us the pleasure pain principle? And why, you know, here the ineffective control is red and yellow, but the effective control is red and yellow. So is that what's the discrepancy there?
Well, if you look at the scales, the top one where it's mostly red, the scales are pretty tilted, saying that I'm not matching what I have in my quality world with what I perceive in the real world. And so it's pain, and pain is shown as red. The bottom scales are almost balanced. And the main arrow, big arrow, is yellow, which means what I'm finding in my path is pleasurable and matching what I have in my quality world. There is still some red, because to get what I want, I may be giving up a little of something else I would like to have too. You know, I can't stay home and go shopping at the same time. Shopping is
Right.
yellow, but there's something still at home I would like to have done. So there's a little. At the top, there was a little yellow also. So even though it's mostly painful, there is some pleasure in it, such as the person with alcoholism. They're unbalanced because, once again, they're drunk and they've been accosted. And so it's very painful. But there was some pleasure from drinking the alcohol. So
Yeah.
we always have a
Okay.
little bit of each.
Always have a little bit of each to kind of keep us alert, to keep us, yeah, okay.
Mona,
So, uh-huh,
Mona,
yes,
I think early on, there were times when a statement would be made that all behaviors are chosen. I don't know, and I'm just kind of vague. And then it evolved more correctly to say almost all behaviors are chosen. And we can give examples of involuntary behavior, but they end up being things that don't make a big difference in the current quality of my life. In other words, if I'm sitting here and I've got carpet on the floor and if somebody walks up behind me and I don't have the camera on like this, and all of a sudden they go, boom. Well, I jumped. I didn't choose to jump. It was an involuntary behavior. It was very brief. But so we can quickly kind of, if you get sick, sometimes it's hard to, or impossible to control this process of maybe getting rid of whatever's in the system to that's making you uncomfortable. So, and we sneeze and we do things. Sometimes we try to control and we hold it or whatever, but those involuntary behaviors then are not what makes the big difference in the quality of my life. So then we can kind of quickly talk about those, but not dismiss them, but put them aside and say then virtually almost all of the other behaviors are things that we have some control and some choice about. And becomes very powerful with that. And I want to go back to the quality world. I have to go yesterday yesterday, let's see, most of us were there yesterday for the techniques and tidbits and tips on teaching and using choice theory reality therapy. And Lucy Billings Robbins made reference to the Counseling with Choice Theory book, and that Glasser cites cases, and then she talked about him elaborating techniques in the index or the appendix. So anyway, I started looking through there a little bit last night, and I'll have to find it again. But somewhere in one of those pages, Glasser made the statement that there are millions of people who may not have any pictures in their quality world. And I may have heard that sometime in the past, but I didn't remember it. But as soon as I read that, I started thinking, well, there are people that are so distraught. The world sucks. Nobody likes me. There's no hope, not anywhere. And maybe they don't even have a past. If you say, well, was there a time in your life when things were going well? And maybe for some people, maybe never. I don't know. But that was interesting as we talk about quality world pictures, we're talking about some difficult counseling now. If a person doesn't have any quality world pictures at all,
Yeah.
or there was some and they took them out, but that was interesting.
okay. So let's go back to our chart here. That whenever we have that zit that says, do something, what state does frustration produce? And it's even, a little bit down in the affective column. What state does that frustration produce? So let me just ask you the question. Does it produce maybe anger, frustration? I mean, frustration, yes, but anger or maybe even depression or being violent, that frustration produces, because the chaos is there. So what is then a secondary state that frustration produces?
We want to behave. We want to do something.
We want to do something.
So we go to our behavioral system, and there are organized behaviors and there are less organized behaviors. And typically we'll go to those behaviors that we've chosen most often in the past, and that have worked to some degree or another, or at least we thought that they did. And so we'll try those first and see how that works. And I mean, this all goes so fast. It's not as if there's this, plodding along, minute by minute kind of thing. It's very fast.
Right.
And
And as we look here in both scenarios, as we look at our behavior system that we're always carrying with us, we can see some wavy lines and we can see some not wavy lines. So that produces frustration, and that frustration, kind of the secondary it produces, is creativity.
Mm.
But the thing of it is that creativity up here effective or ineffective? You see, sometimes we use words and you think creative is oh, it's bringing forth something. It's a beautiful painting. It's a beautiful this. It's a beautiful something else. But creativity can be destruction as much as anything else.
Some of you may remember way back, Glasser said that the DSM was an encyclopedia of creatively chosen behaviors,
Right.
and just, I mean, the person's, as we would say, out of touch with reality and using word salad, and there's no sense of it at all, but it's very creative. Maybe even the language, the words, the thoughts, before, but certainly not helpful to the person at all. And
Okay. And so, yeah.
it may
So
give
let's
them something for the moment, though. They may push people away that they are fearful of, and that may be momentarily helpful to them.
right, but not long term. It still stays in the ineffective. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And then the question is that I like to ask, is that enough? Well, then stop and, how can get in touch with the creativity? How can you do something that would help it to be more effective and, good for you as well as good for others? So systems, everything is a system. All of these, we're looking at one system here, whether we use it effectively or ineffectively. But in system theory, when our quality world pictures match, then what happens is, oh wow, this is what I perceived I wanted. Okay. And the result is more. But you notice that is up in situation A. So how can that more be ineffective?
Those cookies
Anyway.
are really good. Those cookies are really good. 1 or 2 might be fine, but if I eat a dozen of them and do it every day, then I'm going to choose gaining weight, whether I consciously realize it or not. But that's, so it could be both, either one, depending on how many I might choose to eat or not eat, choose not to eat.
Okay. So when things are kind of going our way and we want more, if we have not learned to stop when it is more expedient, we are producing what? Gluttony, addictions, violence, destruction, because we're wanting more of what that initial titillating pleasure was, that is leading in an ineffective lifestyle. So in systems theory, when our quality world pictures and our current feedback matches, negativity diminishes. How is that effective? It's kind of the same thing you were saying, Sharon, with the cookies. You may want more because they really are good, but you have come into enough effective control that you can say thanks, but no thanks.
Well, you've got conflicting wants. Well, I sure would like more of that, but as I think about it, that's not going to be good for me in the long run. So I'm going to go with this want over here and exercise restraint or discipline, or go for something else.
So here's just, we can discuss this for now. Where does evaluation originate? As we begin to look at being more creative, at problem solving, where does that evaluation originate?
Are you asking in the comparing place, or are you asking it's originating in our thought process? Is what we're doing working at all? Is what
Yeah,
we're
well-
thinking working? Is what we're, is what's happening what I want? So all of that is evaluation. Is that what you're after?
Yeah, that, it's how many different places can we go to evaluate? The comparing place is pretty obvious. I've got this, and if I want to kind of bring it in, but are there other places? And you
Oh,
were going
quality
there with
world,
this.
like, is the quality world reasonable? Perceived world, is the information that I'm getting actually accurate? Even in the real world, is how I'm interpreting the real world, which would be perceived world. How I'm interpreting it is that really it? Gee, it feels warm in here. It really feels warm, but oh my goodness, the thermostat says it's 70. It should be fine. Is it that it really isn't 70, or is it the thermostat is broken, or am I broken? It's something inside of me saying it's really warm in here, and it's really me, not out there.
Right. And so it's being open to look at all those different scenarios.
Yeah.
And I think another place is the behavior system. Sue alluded to it. But as that zapper, the urge to behave comes, you were saying that we have organized and sometimes we create new behaviors. But the stronger or the less matched our pictures are, the more urge we'll have to behave. And that begins to go, and those back wheels on the car then begin to give us lots of information. We may have some physiology, headaches, stomach aches, whatever. We may be having some feelings, information coming through, depression, anger, the ones that we know we don't want to have. And then we can choose to move on to the front wheels.
Okay. Anywhere else
Yesterday,
we
in,
evaluate?
yesterday in our reality therapy corner, we probably had 26, 28 participants, attendees. One woman, maybe Jessica, I didn't know, she had a wonderful thing about, she said, thoughts on trial. And so you just, maybe Sue said it a while ago, your perception, is my perception anywhere near accurate? And so she had a nice technique where you say, let's look at the facts versus, you say this, but what's the evidence for it? It was an interesting analogy for putting my thoughts and my perceptions on trial for evaluation.
Right. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying earlier. Let's look at my perceived facts.
Yeah.
Always realizing that there's a little askew there.
Yeah.
You can also evaluate your, I have found this personally very helpful, evaluating my quality world pictures in light of my values, or vice versa. So the value that I'm putting on what I'm perceiving is informed by my quality world, my pictures in my quality world. But do I need to place such a high value, as Wobelding would say, on some things as I do? How much does it matter?
Yeah.
Or should it matter as much as it does? Should it bother me as much as it does?
Well, just looking at this, with the staying in that negative loop, reminds me of one of Dr. Seuss's book on the Sneetches, that, some of them had stars on their belly and some of them didn't. So this this ingenious person came in and could take the stars off if you didn't want them, or could give you a star if you wanted them. But they began to looking at those stars as being, if I don't have one, then boy, I'm superior. But if I do have one, I'm a nobody. And then they started looking around that if I do have one, I'm superior. And if I don't have one, I'm a nobody. And so it goes in there so that, and you know, they went round and around, they kept paying money, they kept going through until this one or that one, and nobody knew which one was what and what one was who. And so there is a way to get out of that negative loop. And this is, y'all have contributed beautifully in letting our audience at large know ways that we can get out of that negative loop and begin to realize that there still may be a little frustration there, but it's for the good of the whole. So anyway, thanks for your input. We're going to go ahead and close out, and then we'll chat together.